For the first 6th edition game, I'm playing a 2,000 point list, kicking it off with my first HQ, which is the Avatar of Cain, supported by Eldar. For elites, I've got Striking Scorpions. The Exarch has both powers and he has the Claw. And there's also a set of Fire Dragons. The Exarch has the Tank Hunter skill and a Dragon's Breath Flamer. For troops, we have a small squad of jet bikes led by a Warlock with Embolden. We have an 11-man Guardian Storm Squad with 2 Flamers. That includes the Warlock, who has Destructor, and they're in a Wave Serpent that has Spirit Stones. We also have a 15-man strong squad of Guardians, also with Destructor. For fast attack, we have a unit of Warp Spiders. For heavy support, we have a Wraith Lord with Bright Lance and Wraith Sword, a Falcon with Bright Lance and Spirit Stones, and lastly, we have the Phoenix Bomber. We get to see how good the IA rules are for 6th edition. In addition, I also took the fortification of Sky Shield Landing Pad, so this Eldar Webway Gate will actually count as a Sky Shield Landing Pad.
And here's what I put together for a 2,000 point list. Now, one of the new things of 6th edition is that you can actually have access to a second force organization chart when you reach a 2,000 point game or more. And I've somewhat made use of that in respect to my HQs, and yeah, that's about it actually. I was thinking when I was first building that I would go into a lot more in terms of what I was going to do, but 20 Wraithguard tends to eat up your points pretty quickly. So I've got 3 HQs in this force. I've got a Farseer, an Autarch with Swooping Hawkwing's power weapon, and a Shuriken Catapult, and a Banshee Mask. And I've got Asserman. I've got 2 squads of 10 Wraithguard with Spirit Seers as troops, as well as a 14-strong squad of Storm Guardians with a Warlock that's got it's got Enhance rather. And I've got a 10-man strong squad of Dire Avengers with an Exarch that's got a power weapon and Shimmer Shield. I've got in fast attack a squad of 5 strong Warp Spiders, Exarch with Power Blades and twin Death Spinners. I've got for heavy support 2 Wraith Lords, one with a sword, the other with an Eldar Missile Launcher and Scatter Laser, and also a single Shadow Weaver platform. And that is the bulk of my list.
This is our deployment. It's a hammer and anvil setup. The mission is Relic. It is number 6. We are playing for the giant tower in the middle, which will actually be a moving relic. Whoever captures it can run around with it. It's essentially capture the flag. First turn, I managed to get a 4-and-up invul save as a blessing to this unit. And I shot a bunch of stuff. I hit things. I wounded them. And Clay actually passed every single armor save he had to make. It was rather impressive. At one point, his Farseer was threatened because it was pretty close, but nothing doing. He passed every test he had to make, and that's pretty much the first turn.
At the bottom of turn 1, I've moved my Wraith Wall forward. The first thing that we did, this is the first piece of new terrain that we've actually rolled on in the edition. One of these, at either end, these rocks are designated as, what are they called again?
They're like archaeocryptic terrain.
The archaeocryptic terrain, something like that, with a 2d6 random effect. I used my Shadow Weaver platform to figure out what it is. And of course I rolled a double 1, and it was a virus bomb. Which, luckily, due to the fact that I have the gun shield to protect me at toughness 7, I was able to easily pass the toughness test that was required to not become a virulent death walker, whatever the hell it is. Anyway, so that was kind of funny, but nothing happened because of it. This bit of jungle was a piece of mysterious terrain too, but nothing happened. It was almost pleasant as my Dire Avengers walked in. And they unloaded with Bladestorm on the jet bike squad that was in the center. Inflicted a number of casualties, including the Warlock in front. So I killed 4 jet bikes. They're fearless, however, because of the Avatar. On the other hand, at the start of the turn, My Farseer used the hallucinations power that he has, and inflicted on the jet bikes. I rolled a 3, which caused them to be able to do basically nothing but move in the following turn. So they're not going to be firing either way.
I passed my Deny the Witch save.
Oh, that's right. He passed his Deny the Witch save, so it didn't do anything. He was able to make a 5-up Deny the Witch save because he had a Warlock in the squad. So that was useful for him. Beyond that, my units are moving up. I inflicted a wound on the Avatar and little else. So onwards to turn 2.
For the top of turn 2, the only reserves I had arrive were the Phoenix Bomber. It flew on nearly its full cruising speed, and it absolutely lit up the Wraithguard unit with the Farseer in it. And because the Farseer was the closest model, a lot of wounds had to keep going against him. And whenever he'd fail, Clay would use a Look Out Sir Ard roll, and he would make it. And that's actually part of the reason why the Wraithguard are so depleted, because they just kept throwing themselves in the way of all the damage. I eventually did kill the Farseer just because I had so much firepower from that unit, from the 4 weapons I did fire, that I eventually killed him. Had I realized how good the Nightfire missiles would be, I would have fired both of those and 1 less of the Shuriken cannons. But overall, it got the job done, so I should have some hefty psychic power. I also was able to move the Relic to the back because I stood next to it for in my movement phase, and then with the assault move from the bikes, I was able to move it another 6 inches. So I'm moving it back towards my way. Clay's still got to come at me, and he's got a lot of stuff in his face that he gets to shoot at and blow up in this next turn.
The bottom of turn 2, unfortunately, my Farseer its life was snuffed out in the previous turn. It died there, but my other units moved forward. Pretty successful actions against the tanks. I was able to take out the Falcon on the right flank with my Wraithguard, and I was able to take out the Wave Serpent on the right flank. Oh wait, left flank, right flank with my Wraithlord with Wraith Sword. Killing vehicles is definitely much more reliable now. If you put in a great volume of fire, it should work. Unfortunately, I used both my Wraithguard squads on the Falcon before it went down. Beyond that, my Dire Avengers, since they Blade Stormed last turn, I moved them up and I charged the Avatar, and I challenged the Avatar with Asserman. I got 2 additional rerolls on any of my rolls I needed to make because I had my 10-man squad that was cheering me on. I passed both my armor saves after he inflicted wounds against me, and I managed to inflict 1 wound on him. One of the rare chances where I could have used the Dire Sword's effect, but he passed his morale check. Beyond that, my Warp Spiders and Autarch deep struck on target behind his Flyer and his Falcon, looking for targets of opportunity. I really wanted to take out his Phoenix Bomber, but I missed with all but one of the Shuriken Catapult attacks with the Autarch. And unfortunately, I would have needed another 6 to hit with that, or to do even a glancing hit with that. So that was not effective at all. Beyond that, everything's moving up onto his side of the field, but he still holds the objective with his jet bike squad. Hopefully I can remove that next turn, but we'll see.
At the end of top of turn 3, I got my Warp Spiders in. They're at the bottom here. They did a couple wounds to the Warp Spider unit that had been there. The most important thing they did, though, was they splatted the Autarch because he was the second closest model. He passed a bunch of saves, but eventually he did succumb to just all the dice. And then right after that, Eldrad used the Psychic Shriek Primaris power from telepathy and managed to do 5 unsavable wounds to the unit. So anyone who was left standing, he just melted their minds, which was pretty awesome. It's the type of thing that I haven't seen since 2nd edition coming from Eldar, so I was really happy with that. The Fire Dragons managed to kill the Sword Wraithlord that had been haunting me over here on the left side. The jet bikes handed off the objective to the Guardians, and I got the Wraith Lord into further combat with the Dire Avengers. Now the Avatar is fighting Acerman, and the Wraith Lord is just stomping on regular Dire Avengers. And that will continue for a while, and then the Phoenix Bomber is all the way in the back. It's going to go off the table next turn because of how fast it has to move, and it killed off the Shadow Weaver for the last turn, so that helped out some, and I'll get a second wave with it. Not in turn 4, but in turn 5 when it's back.
Bottom of turn 3, my Wraith Guard are moving up on the flank. They took out one Warp Spider of that cluster there. Acerman bit the bullet against the Avatar. Real pain in the ass. Eldrad's psychic power that he used that makes me have to reroll all my saves in that squad. So Acerman died, and I failed my morale check. I backed off 2 inches, rolled snake eyes for my fallback. So they're still there, they're broken, but they're either going to get shot to pieces or they're going to just get charged again. So we'll see what happens. I wiped out the Fire Dragon squad with fire from the Storm Guardians and the Wraith Guard. Meanwhile, my Wraith Lord took a shot at the Phoenix Bomber and missed with all of its shots. It needed 6s, so I wasn't really expecting much to happen, but a man can hope. And so we move on to turn 4, and things are looking grim for me.
End of top of turn 4, I managed to consolidate all my Guardians to protect the relic. The Wraith Lord flamed, killed off 6 Dire Avengers. They only had 2 guys left. He also managed to kill off a couple of Guardians. They broke and they ran 11 inches away. When he attempted to charge the Dire Avengers, they actually failed their morale test. Clay rolled, I think, 3 11s in a row for those morale checks and the distance to run. And they ended up being pulled off the board. The Avatar charged into the Wraith Guard. He managed to
Overwatch.
He survived Overwatch, got into combat, and because he went over difficult terrain, he was initiative 1, and the unit ended up causing 1 wound. He failed to save. Otherwise, he did take a wound from Overwatch, so he almost died before he even got there. That is a handy little ability to have, and one that I totally forgot about earlier in the game. So, well played, Clay, for remembering it at an incredibly useful juncture.
Bottom of turn 4, I managed to stem the rout of my army. My Storm Guardians reformed and they moved up. They're mostly in the area terrain. I expect his Phoenix Bomber to come on this coming turn and do some real damage, so I wanted to try and get as many of them as cover as I could. My Wraith Guard squad managed to almost wipe out the Wraith Lord in the middle. Luckily, the Wraith Lord followed up, and with 1 scatter laser shot that wounded managed to make him fail his armor save. And beyond that, I wiped out the Warp Spider squad with my other Wraith Guard squad, a Warp Spider squad, 4 Warp Spider squad, and I only have 4 units left, so my turns are going pretty quickly. We'll see what happens at the top of turn 5 when Dan gets to strike back.
At the end of the top of turn 5, there isn't a lot left on the board. The major items of note are that the Phoenix Bomber came on again and it wiped out the Guardian squad. Outside of that, Eldrad managed to make the Wraith Guard over here hallucinate, so during Clay's turn 5, the only thing they can do is move. They can't do anything else.
Bottom of turn 5?
Yep.
And I've been cautiously skirting the edges of Dan's purchased terrain piece with my Wraith Guard. The left flank Wraith Guard were struck by hallucinations last turn, and all they could do was move. On the right flank, my Wraith Guard squad advanced and took out 2 of the Jet Bikers. Third one failed his morale check, and he ran towards the edge there. My Wraith Lord attempted to shoot down the Phoenix Bomber. It actually got 2 hits with the scatter laser, and it got 1 pen, but he made his hollow field save, and so it did nothing. So now we're on to turn 6 and moving to the end of the game. Assuming we continue.
We do not.
Which we do not. Good game.
Good game. First game of 6th edition. What are your thoughts?
It was fun.
Yeah.
It was a lot more dynamic than what we boiled down to with a lot of our 5th edition games. As I was just talking about, someone who likes to zoom in at the last minute and contest objectives. First of all, the mission that we got is something that we haven't played before. It was almost a capture the flag style mission with it was Relic, and Dan immediately. Of course, we didn't really fully go over the rules when we started the game. So at first we thought it was just 1 point in the center, and then we found out that you can pick up the objective and move with it, and then we found out that you can pass it on and you can only move 6 inches a phase and all that. And it was worth 3 points versus 1 point each for secondary objectives. There was a lot of movement in the game, and it definitely played out differently than how we normally play our games.
I really liked it though, and one of the things is it made the middle of the board so aggressive early. Yeah. Neither of us could just hold back and be a gun line or anything like that. And actually the jet bikes, which were a last minute addition to the list, I threw them in because I didn't want another unit in a transport, but I thought I needed more troops. And they actually ended up being a huge difference maker in the game, if only because they're the ones who grabbed the relic originally and got it away from all the Wraith Guard. That was a huge, huge bonus for me, because trying to deal with 20 Wraith Guard and a bunch of Wraith Lords in your face, I held the middle for a while with just the Avatar.
You did, yeah. You actually pushed back my forces at first. On the left flank, which you basically left untouched, yeah. My Wraith Guard there were still whole, but on your left flank, I should say, and in the middle, you just crushed it basically with your fire dragons getting out of the wreck transport, and your Avatar and your Wraith Lord tag teaming Asserman and the Dire Avengers in the middle. One of my favorite things about this was, and yeah, the jet bikes were a great addition, and the nice thing about their the addition of their Jinx save, yeah, and still being able to fire makes them a lot more versatile, where you still get some coverage while still being able to move and fire and engage the enemy. Whereas the grav tanks, honestly, what I'm used to playing against you is you zooming around with grav tanks, rather impervious to fire. And just, you either wait for them to get wrecked or you stop, you end your movement after moving flat out and unload units and get the hell out of there and just keep harassing me the game. You couldn't get in close with the grav tanks this game.
Yeah, they die much more reliably, which is both going to be good for the game and it's going to be a little tough to get used to. But they do die much more reliably.
Definitely, it really makes my Wraith Guard a more valuable unit. Yeah. Previously, it's a crapshoot whether or not I would actually destroy a vehicle with the whole squad firing at it. Yeah. Now, a 400-point squad of Wraith Guard, if they're in range with their 12-inch guns, they can actually reliably kill a tank, even if you get that Jinx save and you're moving fast. So I was very pleased with that. Yeah. Some people have already commented who have played early 6th edition games. Monstrous creatures are much improved. In 5th edition, we were in this bizarre situation where monstrous creatures were very good at killing vehicles, but they couldn't hit vehicles. Almost nothing could hit vehicles in close combat. So they weren't good at that role. Yeah. Now now you'll know. You can't just drive your vehicles up now and just drop them off 6 inches away.
You've got skimmers or you've got vehicles moving fast and people need 6s to hit. It's not like that anymore. On a 3 and up, your vehicle's done. It is toast. And with the way the penetration works, although you never even needed to because you do enough hits just through glances to down the thing, it's just much more reliable for killing vehicles.
Yeah, definitely. And, honestly, another thing, I guess this is kind of linked to it, but I'm going to go back to what we were talking about. With my Wraith Lord with the sword charging, I needed 7 inches to connect with the charge. I was fairly confident of making that, and I did. It's definitely, people were concerned about the 2d6 charge range, and you may fall short. On average, you're going to do better. You aren't going to get that 6 guaranteed, but the potential is much greater. You were talking about how you thought, and a number of other people have theorized, assault's going to happen much later in the game, that sort of thing. I found that it was just about the same in terms of getting an assault.
See, I think it really will depend probably on the mission and on the deployment. That may have a large effect on how long it takes to actually get into assault. But one of the things I said during the game was all of the random dice rolls had no real effect on the game, on the outcome of the game.
Yeah.
It wasn't like anything was lost because of a piece of terrain or anything like that, or any of the charge. We made every charge except for one, and you were looking at charging what, 10 inches?
10 inches, yeah, through difficult terrain.
Yeah. Another concern that I had, and I put on the forums on Warseer, and felt vindicated by my concern, is flyer units. Armies without Skyfire are going to be really, really hammered by flyer units.
Well, would you say that many other flyers compare in terms of firepower to your Phoenix Bomber?
A lot of them do, yeah. I mean, think about it like this. Razor Wing can have 4 monocyte missiles. It can come on in one turn. It can fire all 4 of them. They're large template, strength 7, and you can just obliterate a unit with.
And now you can really see. Now you can really see why they put the single use weapons on it, because with the way the flyers work in 6th edition, you're going to be making passes unless you're on a larger board and you really have room to maneuver. It's usually not worth it to spend a couple turns maneuvering back around when you can just go off the board and come back on the next turn.
This table setup specifically works well for the flyers because you can just move so far, so fast. You could move 60 inches in a turn if you really wanted to. So you can essentially just cross the board in a moment's notice. And when the board is long like this, they're just so good for getting back in to support you when they've gone off the board previously and they come back on. And, I think flyers are going to become real common just because that's the only way a lot of armies are going to be able to get Skyfire.
Yeah.
And it is going to be such a big deal.
With the way that wound allocation works, you could come in at an angle and target exactly what you want to hit. You actually probably took out more than you would have simply because my Farseer was exposed in the closest model. So I kept making lookout sir rolls, and it kept knocking down Wraithguard on strength 4 hits.
Yeah.
But I had to. So that was interesting.
To save the Farseer because he was the closest guy at that point. And, a lot of that is just going to be people getting used to the game because I'm sure we're all going to have, just mental errors like that because it's never something we had to worry about before.
Yeah.
Whether you're on the front, which always looks a bit more heroic, now you really do lead more from the middle than the back, especially because if you're leading from the back and someone deep strikes behind you, your guy's going to go anyway.
Which is kind of what happened, though. It's funny, I deep struck with my Warp Spiders and completely duffed whatever it was I was doing. Was I firing at the flyer? The Phoenix, and I didn't hit with that. Well, I didn't hit with anything except for that Shuriken catapult, which had a snowball's chance in hell of doing anything. And then your Warp Spiders deep struck behind me, and before my Octar could even do anything, you basically assassinated it.
Yeah.
Because it was the closest thing. Small squad sizes are going to be difficult to hide characters in. We had like five Wraithguard jumped in or 4 different Wraithguard jumped in the way of the Farseer before he died.
You can kind of imagine him just using his psychic powers to move them in the way. They weren't so much diving as he was just floating them out there.
And I mean, speaking of psychers.
Oh my God.
I'll let you start off with that.
Okay. So I went with Eldred Ulthrin, who is going to be once more the most common Farseer that you see, especially if tournaments do switch to 6th edition.
Yeah. When they switch to 6th edition, really.
He was just a monster. It was a little weird not being able to cast things like Fortune or Guide because there are so many times, or even Doom, that I felt like, oh my God, I really wish I had that power. But about halfway through the game, I wasn't thinking about fortune or guide anymore because I had 4 powers, and I got a couple really good ones.
The yeah, who needs Doom when you had that reroll force the enemy unit to reroll their armor saves?
Past armor saves.
That blew the center out of my force.
Yeah.
With Asserman, Asserman, his strength is he's the Phoenix Lord with an invulnerable save.
Yeah.
And I probably would have killed the Avatar in the end, considering the way I was making those invulnerable saves in the end.
Because you kept passing them and then re-rolling and then failing.
Yep, and I failed I failed all the ones that I passed the first time and then had to re-roll.
Yeah.
And he died very quickly after that, unfortunately. And you used that to great effect. That was a nice power.
That was
you flamed all the Dire Avengers you wounded after I had to re-roll my saves and failed them.
Yep.
And I mean, honestly, the hallucinations power, the other power that I actually got a chance to use and you got to use, that it wasn't actually quite the deadly power. It has a potential to be, but it is a really good disabling power.
You know, overall, I have to say, just once again, monstrous creatures way up, flyers way up, psychic powers way up, vehicles way down. They got
in my opinion,
schooled, but they got dulled.
Yeah, in my opinion, that was a needed nerf to change the dynamic of the game.
Absolutely.
Because 5th edition vehicles were king.
Yeah.
Honestly, if you think about the core of everyone's army, whether it's transports or basically heavy support sitting there with a gun line with tanks, they're the ones that are doing all the heavy lifting.
Yeah.
And if you don't have overwhelming numbers of anti-vehicle, you're not gonna make a dent on anything.
Yeah.
Now you might be able to work around having most of your army dedicated to anti-vehicle like it was before. Now you might actually get some use out of infantry. I didn't necessarily this game, but that's mainly because you had a very nice core setup there.
One thing I do want to say is I made use of the fortifications.
Oh,
and
that's right.
that was essentially the landing pad option, which is 75 points. And this is a little bit smaller than the actual landing pad that GW sells for Imperials. But using it as the same thing, I essentially had this 4-and-up save bubble. So Clay didn't shoot much at what was in it because he knew it would be
for a vulnerable save. Yeah. I mean, it wouldn't have made much sense for me to shoot. And I didn't have much in terms of the long-range guns. The only one I had was the Shadow Weaver and back, which I fired once to kill the Guardian. Yeah. But other than that, that was definitely a very strong defensive point.
Now, you used the second detachment, the second primary detachment.
I did, just for another HQ, though.
Yeah.
I thought I would, people were concerned about spamming units, that sort of thing. Especially with allied detachments and secondary detachments, because we played a 2,000-point list. I was excited because I was like, oh man, I'm going to get to take maybe another Wraith Lord, some other sort of heavy support troop or support option, because usually what I am struggling with is making room for more heavy supports. I have so many nice options that really I need to gain momentum with my force. I didn't have enough room because I splurged and went for a 3rd HQ, which didn't work out at all. If I were to pick out a unit, I would probably have to say the Sword Wraith Lord or the 10-man guard or the 10-man Wraith Guard squad that survived. Either of the Wraith squads really did well. They would be tied up there. And my Sword Wraith Lord did a good job of popping that vehicle, but then he got blown up by the Fire Dragons.
Yeah.
I would probably say it's a tie between my Wraith Guard squads. One wasn't shot at, but they both had a similar effect. Mm. So I was pleased with how they went and how they actually destroyed vehicles. I missed it. It's been a while.
For me, I don't know who to pick either, but it's probably because I had 3 key units.
4, really.
Yeah.
But 5.
I mean, the Psyker, Eldrad was massively involved in the game, and he had a huge impact on the game.
Yeah.
But sort of the Phoenix Bomber, because it killed the Farseer.
Yep.
And so did the jet bikes because they're the ones who scooped up the objective to begin with and got it away from you.
Yeah, and they just ran right in my face.
Yeah.
I blade stormed on them. Of course, in retrospect, how I played my Dire Avengers, I could have played them differently and been more satisfied. I blade stormed in the first turn on his jet bikes, hoping to really get a big opening salvo there. I did kill 3, one of which was the Warlock. I was pleased with it, but you grabbed the objective and you just ran. And meanwhile, next turn when your monstrous creatures were bearing down on me, I had nothing to shoot. So all I could do was I just charged the Avatar. I was thinking your Avatar did very well as well.
He
holding
did
up
as well because he just slowed you down so much.
And then the Wraith Lord came in. The Wraith Lord did very well because that was really the coup de grace in the middle there. I could have held down your Avatar, but with the Wraith Lord coming in, that was too many threats to deal with.
All in all, I had a great time.
It was a fun game.
I look forward to the next one.
Yep.